Chapter 28 Yako on Leave. While in the Kitsune clan after their previous sortie, Inari summoned Yako's squad into the briefing room with the Confederate officer. The Confederate officer then said, "Given your success on weakening the Amazonian air defenses, I have decided that you have all earned some time off. Enjoy your leave as Lady Inari takes from here." Inari then said to Yako, "You've taught them well, even if their sentence isn't entirely over. But given that you four have proven to make a good skulk, I'll grant you some leave for a week to spend some time with each other. Yako, how about taking them to a good tavern with some good sake? The tab is on me, my good servant." Yako then bowed. "Thank you, my master." Yako then took his squad members with him as Fennec asked, "So what bar are we headed to?" Yako then answered, "We're headed to a place owned by a friend of mine. It's popular with a lot of the Ninetails, and where I first met Dixie." "Who's Dixie?" "She is Vixie's servant and goes with Executor Vixie wherever she goes. She's kind of like her assistant." "You ever gonna ask her out on a date? What kind of vixen assistant could say no to a guy like you?" "She's not a vixen." Fennec then looked curious. "Oh, is she a gorgeous nymph?" "No." "Then what is she?" Yako then looks at Fennec, making a neutral expression on his protection visor. "She's a tanuki." Fennec then looked at Yako disturbed. "What the heck? Does Inari know about this?" Yako then crossed his arms while raising his tails. "Probably not, or she just doesn't care. But unlike most tanukis, Dixie is at least respectable, and someone I usually don't say that about her kind." "What could possibly make a savage tanuki respectable to a high-ranking member of our clan?"
"It's because she's not a savage like so many others. She's civilized."
And when Yako's squadron arrived at the bar, Yako opened the door and took a seat. And inside was a dimly lit room with a grand piano and almost no customers because of the time of day. And behind the counter was the owner and bartender, Vixie's husband, Todd Reddington. Yako then tossed a gold coin onto the hat of the piano man and asked,
"You got any ragtime?"
The piano man with two fluffy tails then said, "Yes, boss." The piano man then started to play Scott Joplin's Maple Leaf Rag, as Yako took a seat at the bar when Todd asked, "The usual?" Yako then looked at the new selections on the shelf and asked,
"What's the one that says Julius's bootleg?"
Todd then raised his claw, grabbing a bottle. "Ah, that one. I saw this one when I was in Omaha and traveling across America on vacation. Might be one of the only good American beers, so I ordered a few cases to see how it would do here."
"And I'll take a bottle of that. I haven't had a good beer in a while."
Yako then put a coin on the counter as the nine-tailed bartender with red and cream-colored fur handed Yako the bottle. Todd then asked while motioning his muzzle towards the others in Yako's squadron, "What about the others? What do they want?" Yako then faced his protection visor towards Todd with the nanite creating a temporary hole to take a drink. Yako then asked,
"Why not ask them? They're right here."
Todd then asked the rest of Yako's squadron, "What can I get you kids? If you're old enough to be in here, that is." Todd then winked and twitched one of his black fox ears. Fennec then said, "I'll have whatever Glacier's having." Glacier then grinned towards Fennec and ordered the most feminine drink imaginable. Frucion then ordered a glass of sake and some fried tofu and wax candles to chew on. And while enjoying their drinks, Frucion kept eyeing a vixen at the end of the table, having a glass of expensive Elvis champagne, while her was a tanuki having a beer. And for as much as he tried to focus on the wax candles and fried tofu, he couldn't stop glancing at her gorgeous white fur and violet tips and all her 9 tails, with those iridescent violet eyes. And if she wasn't wearing her long, flowing silk robe, wearing the patterns of birds and clouds, and wearing her veil over her ears, she might be the most beautiful vixen Frucion had ever seen. Meanwhile, the tanuki looked a little different from her. She was a bit thicker, not in fat, but in muscle, almost matching Frucion. She also had a big, fluffy tail with a single black tip, and looked like she could equal Frucion given that she was quite lean. She was also dressed in regular Kitsune garb like the vixen, sitting next to her. But seeing Frucion constantly glance towards her direction, the tanuki girl glared at Frucion with her forest green eyes while putting down her beer and asked, "What, you never seen a tanuki before?" But before it could escalate, Todd stepped in and said, I don't think he has. Todd then faced Ferucian. I'd like you to meet Dixie. She's someone who runs the place during the night shift. And she's my wife's servant, but she's more like extended family to us. Ferucian then asked, Since when did the clan start treating coons like family? The beautiful Vix then gracefully put down her champagne and glared at Ferucian as just one look from her terrified him. Meanwhile, Todd face palmed and said, What are they teaching kits these days? Todd then put his paw hands on the bar and tails up while staring into Ferucian's eyes. Listen, Kit. Dixie's a good person. Not all Tanukis are like those you've heard about Souzun fighting centuries ago. If anything, they've been helping us out, and it's about time you let the past die. Unless you want to end up like Don Ringtail and Inari. Ferucian then asked, Did you just make an insolent remark about the image of Inari? Todd then held out his paw hand with a lit cigar in Ferucian's direction. I didn't say anything against her personally. Just stating the fact that she still holds on to some idea. And the Tanuki clan is still what it used to be. Well, used to be before Victor showed up. Ferucian then sneered at Todd. Like that pathetic coward could make a savage race civilized. Dixie then started to growl hearing Ferucian talk about her kind, but more so because of how he spoke about Victor. But Todd said calmly, Listen, kid. Out of all the Kitsunes the Tanuki clan would go after, they would never lay a single claw on Victor. Not even the Ringtail Mafia. You know why? It's because he's the one who saved Moshi the Blacktail from his life of crime, and into a respectable monk who saved children from criminal underworld. And it was Moshi who began the missionary work for the salvation of the Tanuki clan, with the help of his 72 former gang members. And to risk one's well-being and having the humility to live with and to love one's enemies, who for Friar Victor was the Tanuki clan, is one of the greatest feats of courage this clan has ever seen. You are in no place to call Victor a pathetic or a coward until you show some strength to comfort your own self, and courage to see yourself for who you truly are. Yako then remembered he martyred Moshi and took a drink. And Yako thought to himself, Inari, even though I know you ordered me to kill Moshi the Blacktail for his crimes, I can't help but feel as fulfilling your will did more evil than good. For Moshi was one of them who died at my blade, who I believe was innocent, and I will never be purified of innocent blood. Vixie then asked Yako, You still haven't gotten over Moshi, haven't you? Yako then said, Please, not in front of the children. Fennec then asked, So what exactly did happen between that coon and Yako? Vixie then answered, I prefer if you called Moshi by his name. But Moshi was one of the Victor's spiritual children when, in order to learn humility, the head of the monastery made Victor live within the Tanuki clan as a beggar. And Victor was also my spiritual father as well as my husband's, and we both gained our 9th tails. But that's besides the point. Before Moshi met Victor, he was a ringleader of a bandit gang of 72 members and made a life as a career criminal. But even after Moshi became a Christian and left his life of crime behind, Yako didn't believe he was sincere nor pure in his intentions, nor did Inari, because Moshi was infamous for targeting her caravans personally. So, Inari ordered Yako to kill Moshi, and that's what Yako did. It wasn't until after, from his former bandit gang, that he learned Moshi truly repented of his life. Vixie then lowered her voice in sorrow. It's haunted him ever since. Yako then said, And that's why I will never be purified of his blood, and I will always remain in eternal servitude to atone for my impurity. That is the fate of a Nogitsune. Vixie then asked, Then why not pay a visit to Moshi's shrine? Just try not to get killed when every Tanuki recognizes you as the killer of one of their clan's greatest heroes. Yako then got up and said, If you don't mind, I have some things I need to do. Vixie then slightly bowed, knowing what Yako was about to do. I understand. The rest of you, have a good time. Todd, charge it on my tab. Yako then left the bar after finishing his drink and made his way towards Victory's centuries-old monastery, St. Nicholas, enlightener of the Kitsune clan. But seeing it uninhabited for decades, Yako felt a sadness he could not describe and muttered, Victor, why have you forsaken us? And when Yako stood at the door of the statuary, In the midst of the statuary, he removed his protean visor and prostrated himself before the image of Moshi. Yako then said to the statue of Moshi, "If you have anything to say to me, say it to me, and with all humility I will listen to what you have to say." And then a tanuki stood before Yako's prostration. The tanuki then said, "You come to me often to seek my forgiveness, but I have already forgiven you centuries ago. I deserve to be put to death for what I did to your people. Now you must forgive yourself." Yako then asked, "What will forgiveness do for me now? I am stained with impurity, and my hands are forever soaked with your innocent blood. I am not even worthy to be your servant." "I seek not service from you, Yako, only your salvation. There are others who need you, and do not destroy your life for their sakes." But before Yako could inquire further, the tanuki vanished with only the statue of Moshi remaining before him. But after putting his protogen visor back on, Inari had entered the statuary and said, "I thought I might find you here, prostrating before that raccoon again." Yako then answered, "Yes, master." "You know he was just as guilty as Gumiho. Why repeatedly ask for his forgiveness when you will not receive it until you repay everything you've done in your service to me?"
"I'd rather humble myself before those I've done evil against, because I know who I am."
Inari then laughed. "You are so much like my executor Vixie. Perhaps she should have married you instead of Todd, who's a lowly bartender. Why dirty yourself with raccoons on 2 feet, and go back to the place where monks live like homeless people?" Yako then glared at Inari behind his protogen visor that she would say such a thing, especially in front of Moshi and in the monastery that forged some of the finest of the Kitsune clan. Yako then asked, "Master, why do you insult the clan's finest in the monastery that forged them?" Inari then spun around and, holding her paw hands out, and asked, "Where are the clan's finest with us today? Why do you hold on to so many old memories when you should be making new ones? Let the past die, Nogitsune." Yako then gritted his interlocking teeth.
"What are some parts of our path that we're saving? Like Victor?"
"He's the only exception. The rest of the clan can burn in the next bonfire for all I care, and sacrifice the finest works of our people to the great Okami Inari, that we may have eternal prosperity. Besides, a burnt offering of this monastery, with its unfathomable value, to the great Okami Inari will serve to bring prosperity for centuries to come." Yako then snarled behind his visor while struggling to maintain his composure and not strike Inari down right then and there. "Prosperity? At that price? Destroying the history of our people?" Inari then held a cyan ball of green Kitsune by in her paw hand as she said, "Sometimes for the greater good sacrifices have to be made. Sometimes we have to burn down the decaying forest to plant new life." Yako then rested his paw hand on the hilt of his magic-infused sword, where Inari could not see it.
"But what is so dead and decaying about our heritage that we have to burn it down?"
Inari then fizzled out her Kitsune by. "My servant, people only want 2 things, prosperity and pleasure, and that is what I bring them. Anything beyond that is a pointless endeavor, and our heritage doesn't contribute to neither. So long as people are with luxury and full bellies, they are in need of nothing. So, why not leave this silly place of our history and join my quest to bring prosperity and fullness for everyone?"
2 wolves. While sleeping in his bed in Inari's palace, Yako began to dream, and in his dream there were 2 wolves, one with the voice of Victor, and the other with the voice of Inari. But in his dream, Yako sat still in a meditative state, as Inari Wolf whispered into his left ear, "Do you not desire to reclaim your family's pride and honor as their only child? Why do you then continue to be a stubborn Nogitsune, who does not know his place. The victor wolf then said clearly in Yako's right side, "Pride is not the opposite of your shame, but was the source of it. Continue down the path of humility, so that you may be made whole." "What are those little kits to you? You are so much more powerful, and your life as my servant so much more valuable than theirs. They are but tanukis compared to you. Remember the humility of Moshi, to see himself in others. Fulfill your destiny, and be free from this slavery to pride, and continue to see yourself in others." This is who you are, nothing more than a disobedient Nogitsune, who is not even worthy to show his face or have a name. You are mine, and that's the best you will ever be. It's time you look within yourself and ask, who are you? Are you not more than an extension of your master? What could you possibly gain apart from me? I can grant you all the wealth and pleasure in the world, so long as you obey me and abandon your own self. What is more important to you? To be fat and enslaved, to fear punishment, or be free and find true peace and happiness? But before the wolves could speak to him any further, he summoned a wall of foxfire around himself, as the wolves vanished, leaving him alone as he spoke up, with muffled screaming under his protogen visor. Sweat dripped down his face, but in his bedroom he had remained the same, just as he left it before he went to sleep. He then got out of bed to look at the mirror, taking off his protogen visor, staring into his reflection. And as he stared, 2 ceramic wolf figurines sat in front of his mirror with scrolls in their mouths. Yako then asked his reflection, "Who am I?" Did you know this? Saint Nicholas, enlightener of the Kitsune clan. This was a play on of a real-world saint known as Saint Nikolai, enlightener of Japan, who brought Orthodox Christianity to Japan, which is the country where the Kitsune folklore comes from. And it's fitting in the context of AWFT, given the Kitsune clan's more mystical traditional culture as opposed to its contemporary culture of decadence, legalism, and postmodernism. Todd and Vixie. This comes from the simple fact that male foxes are called a Todd, and a female fox is called a Vixen. All of the Kitsunes in Yako Squadron, except for Glacia, are all named after different fox species. Fennec is a fennec fox, Roussillon is named after an extinct fox species, and Glacia is an Arctic fox. Reddington also refers to Todd being a red fox, which is the most common type of fox species everyone is familiar with. Why Kitsune is prostrate instead of kneel. This comes from the simple fact that the legs on a Kitsune are digitigrade, meaning that their bone structure makes them constantly walk on their toes, using their tails to help balance themselves. This bone structure makes kneeling for a Kitsune very difficult, as well as to maintain balance. So as a sign of submission and humility, Kitsunes make prostrations. Their multiple tails are also the main reason why traditionally Kitsunes wore robes, as it was more practical than pants, with many holes on the backside. Ethnicities within species. Until this point, all characters of the same race had similar features. However, when delving into the actual cultures where these characters' ancestors come from, there are actually multiple ethnicities within those races. Dixie is an example of this. Although Dixie and Natalia are both tanukis, Dixie has a single black tip at the end of her tail, while Natalia has cream-colored rings around her tail. This is an example of 2 different ethnicities within the tanuki race. Likewise, there are multiple ethnicities within Kitsunes which come from having more features of standard red fox, while others having features like an Arctic fox. However, an interesting fact, Natalia's tail is actually more akin to a raccoon than it is a more common phenotype among the tanuki race, although the tail pattern on Dixie's is actually what the real tail pattern on an actual tanuki animal looks like.